All right, ready?
Oh, yeah, I did it 3 times.
Here we go.
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. Hi, I'm Angie.
And I'm Jamie.
We're not porn stars anymore.
No, that's not right. You said it wrong. I don't know why I'm here or what I'm doing.
Did you ever want to know the dirty details of your therapist's life?
Welcome to the Shrink Show. Hi, listeners. So look at us. We're virtual today.
Ooh, something new.
Okay. And it's going not at all smoothly, but we're virtual because we wanted to virtually introduce you to our guest today, Jennifer House.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello, I'm here.
We're virtual because it's cheaper than us flying or driving to Canada. Because where in Canada are you?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta.
Is that?
It's closer to the West Coast. If you've heard of Vancouver.
Yes.
Oh, it's by Vancouver, yeah.
Vancouver than
Where
Toronto.
they record almost every like Americanized TV show that's supposed to be, East or West Coast in Vancouver. Yeah.
We have the Calgary Stampede. We have the Calgary Flames if you're into hockey. That's about it.
Nice. So born and raised?
Yeah, I am.
It's funny because I was listening to your video and I could hear a little bit of an accent, which obviously to you doesn't sound like an accent, but for a second there, because I didn't know where you were from, I was like, is she from Boston?
Oh, really?
I find that kind of funny.
Me too. It's awesome.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't have an accent, but maybe I do.
I heard the Northern. I got very excited. It's like, yes, there it is. Well, wonderful. So Jennifer, first off, how about just introduce yourself and a little bit of your background and what led you into, so you are our dietitian expert. You teach and have different courses and classes for baby-led weaning, for picky eaters, but give us more of an introduction as to who you are and how you came to be where you're at.
Sure. Well, like you mentioned, I'm a dietitian, so went to university for that, as well as have a master's. For some reason, I don't use it, but I enjoy being a student. So spent a lot of time in school. And right after I got out of school, I was working at a children's hospital, seeing outpatients. So a lot of those were picky eaters. And now looking back, I have cringed thinking about like all the advice I gave that was horrible, like not being a mom, right? And now I'm a mom and have 3 kids, so a lot more empathy, the practical experience counts too. So I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I help parents basically make mealtimes more peaceful, right? I want to end the battles. We want to raise kids who have a healthy relationship with food and, for the dinner table to be a good place for everybody to go, which is really hard when you're feeding a kid that only eats like 2 different foods, right? It's very frustrating. So yeah, at least 50% of parents with kids struggle with picky eating. So I help the younger ones and getting into helping the older ones as well, and train health professionals on dealing with picky eaters. So that's mostly my world right now.
Did that come like mainly out of experience? Because I do feel like a lot of the times the things that we're drawn to are because we're met with that frustration or we're met with that challenge and we're like, and we have to find a solution. Like for you, I guess, were you a picky eater? Like what really drew you into, was it your own children? What was that draw?
Right. So I wasn't a picky eater, but my middle child was. And she's, for the most part, she's 12 now, so she's grown out of that. But we had years of, I guess, the classic picky eating, right? Like didn't want foods touching, would never try new foods. And luckily I was trained in the division of responsibility. Some of the things we'll talk to today. So I never made it a battle, but occasionally I could see my husband trying to get into that fight. And I know it's really hard not to engage in that, right? And when she was 4, I actually found out she had low iron, which is super common when your kid doesn't eat many foods, right? And that just perpetuates the cycle. So having that experience, like I know what it feels like. And now I feel like I do better with my clients than I did with my own child, right? I'm like, okay, go get your iron tested. And why are they picky, or why aren't they growing? So yeah, with her, I felt like a bit of a mom failure, but I can take that experience now and try and help other parents.
I love that.
That's so wonderful. Oh my gosh, my stepson, he was a huge picky eater. Like when I first met him, it was right before he turned 2. And then for a chunk of the like the next couple of years, all he would eat was peanut butter and crackers and chocolate milk. And that was it.
Oh, well, at least he had 3 of the 4 food groups covered.
Fair.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was outrageous.
Well, and it's so funny, even when I think about, like you described picky eating as not wanting their foods to touch. So
Yeah.
I would never have described myself as a picky eater, ever. My grandma put fucking Rocky Mountain oysters in front of me and
Wow,
was
and
like, "Here, try this." And she always had a spoonful of whatever and a napkin. And she said, if you don't like it, spit it out. And so I always tried anything. I was always open to. However, there were certain things like not wanting to have my food touch. And I just really, I couldn't stand I wouldn't eat it along the edge, because it was like, it tainted it. Like, it was like, it's fucking ruined. And I see my 6-year-old daughter doing the same thing. She's like, no, I don't like my food to touch. And I'm like, I do, I get it.
yeah, they feel like that anything on the plate is contaminated if something they don't like touches it, right? Like really do. So those divided plates for kids are totally fine. I'm happy if a kid wants to use a divided plate, no problem.
Yeah. So I guess, Jamie, do you have a first question that you wanted to ask?
Well, let's see. So, well, honestly, starting off with what we're talking about here with picky eaters, with things like that, you know, I know, speaking from my experience, it turns into a power struggle, of like, okay, well, I know my kiddo needs to eat like more foods, or I want them to try foods and not be afraid of it. But then it turns into, well, they don't want to, or like their food is touching. You don't have those pretty divided plates. And so, I mean, even my 5-year-old, she's very particular about, like, for example, on our Taco Tuesday we have every week, she is really into, she's like, she calls it chicken, but it's hamburger on the left and cheese on the right. And then the other day she's like, no, I want it mixed together. And she freaked out, and she's never wanted mixed together. But I was like, okay, as I'm stirring it on her plate and throwing it back at her. But it's just, I guess, how do you help parents with that part? Because I know it gets frustrating when I'm like, okay, I'm trying to accommodate, be here for you, but with my stepson's example, like, okay, let's incorporate something new besides peanut butter and crackers for a full couple of years.
Right. And oh man, there's, I think, definitely a lot to unpack there, but I think it comes down to making, first of all, parents feel a little more relaxed, because we get really anxious, right? Like if you look into what the deep fear is, what is it? It's going to be that our child's not going to get enough nutrients, they're not going to grow, they're going to be brain damaged, they're going to die, right? Like there's some of that fear under there. So I talk a lot about like lowering our expectations. Like I mentioned, well, at least your kid is eating 3 out of the 4 food groups, right? Like it's not too horrible.
I know, you were very nice about it. That made younger me feel so good.
So good. And they need to eat less than we think they do. Parents often don't think their kids eat enough, but then I say, well, are they growing? Well, yeah, they're growing perfectly right along their curve, wherever that may be. Then at least we know they're getting enough to eat, right? So we don't have to be worried. about trying to bribe, pressure, beg, reward them to eat more. I mean, variety is something that can be a little bit different, right? Maybe they're not getting enough variety or not getting enough iron or nutrients. And in that case, while we work on expanding their diet, it's totally fine to offer multivitamins or offer vitamins. Again, that helps parents feel a little bit better, right? Okay, like my kid didn't eat his dinner, but at least he's getting some vitamins and minerals from his Flintstone vitamin or whatever it may be.
I had a friend once, she was like 3 and she snuck on top of the cabinet and opened, and this was before child locks, opened the Flintstone vitamin giant jar from the top of the fridge, got it down, and ate like all the red ones because she didn't like the purple ones. Oh my God. Like her mom was in full on panic because she thought they were candy. And I can see that because like my 2-year-old thinks that they're candy. She thinks they're gummies. She's like, I want my yummies. I want my yummies. And I'm like, no, you can only have one. Back up.
I know it's hard. They really do taste like candy, right? And I also talk a lot about not having these forbidden foods or, creating these cravings. But obviously with vitamins, you can't let them eat as much as they want, or you might be taking a trip to the hospital.
Right. So along the lines of like that kind of that picky eating, one thing, and I don't know if this necessarily falls within it, but as I was thinking about some of the trends in my own kids and in myself, there was one that came up, and my 6-year-old seems to be the most similar to me when it comes to food, right? So she can't have her food touching. I couldn't either. I can now, I can mix it all together and it's delicious. But at the time I couldn't. Another thing that I ran into and I've noticed in her is, for me, it was eating things like apples and oranges. For her, it's more like steak. It's almost like there's something about the texture. She likes the flavor and she eats it, but she continues to chew and can't swallow it. And so she doesn't know what to do with it anymore. It's just stuck in her mouth. And it like drives her mad. And again, I don't know if this falls within your realm, but it just got me thinking about like that kind of sensory textural, like the things that come with being a picky eater. Like I always say mushrooms, I like the flavor of mushrooms, but I, for the longest time, said I hated them because they squeaked in my teeth, because I have a lot of sensory things. Or like peas, they're too mushy. I like very crunchy things. And so like how much of that comes to play, I guess, in kids and even as grown-ups, like how much of that comes to play in what we choose to eat or not choose to eat?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So going back to the steak example and looking at why kids don't eat, there's so many reasons beyond just behavioral. One could be oral motor, like if kids avoid real meat or hard fruits or veggies, maybe they have a hard time, moving it around in their mouth. They might have a weak tongue or jaw, might be physically difficult to eat. And sensory is huge too. So we have 8 senses and we use them all when we're eating, right? Every single one of them. And you can be an over-responder or an under-responder in one or more of these senses, whether it's just looking at the food or smelling the food or touching the food or tasting the food or hearing that squeak in your mouth. So yeah, sensory is huge as well. And it's important to look into this, right? And figure out what's bothering your kid and how we can maybe make it easier for them to eat. So that video you watched with my 8-year-old, it is part of a program. It's called Sequential Oral Sensory by Dr. Kay Toomey. So it's all focused on picky eaters and sensory. And this was the Food Explorer program for ages 6 and up. So for younger kids, there are other ways that you explore food with your senses, more play-based, right? Like feed your teddy bear, or like let's run this piece of cheese that looks like a car up your arm. But with the older kids, they have enough cognition to like look at this food and kind of go through the senses. Like, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Take a little taste and write it down. and start with favorite foods because that gets them comfortable with it. They like to do it. And then maybe go on to some of the newer foods that might be a little more challenging. But if, they're motivated to try new foods, which when they're older, sometimes they are because they don't want to be singled out. They want to go to their friends. They want to go to camp, right? They're a little more motivated to explore a little bit. The 2-year-old's a different story.
Well, and I guess on those same lines, at what point is it allowing kiddos to explore, and saying, okay, here, try this food, try this new thing, and like, no, you have to eat this, like, especially coming at it from the dietitian standpoint of going back again to like that fear-based mindset that definitely I've gone down. You have to eat like this food group because you haven't had this, or like you need to make sure you've had too much of this, so I'm gonna say take at least a bite of this, right? How do you find that balance?
So this is probably where I would talk about the division of responsibility by Ellen Satter. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but parents have certain roles in feeding, children have certain roles in eating. So starting with the child's roles, their roles are if they eat or how much they eat of the food you've offered them at the, meal and snack times without any pressure from the parents. And the pressure can be asking them to take a bite. It could be bribing them with dessert. It could be giving them a look. It could be comparing them to their brother. It could be telling them like, this is going to make you grow strong, right? Like there's so many ways that we pressure kids to eat and don't even realize it.
Well, we're fucking up.
It's so hard for parents to let go of that, right? And to not.
Well, because if you think about it, in all fairness, that is how we learned, right? That's right. Those are all the things that we heard growing up. And so it's like you parent based on how you were parented because you think that that's the way until you know better. Kind of like Maya Angelou. You do the best you can until you know better.
So you don't know until you know. Well, right. And I guess I've tried to consciously like come to terms with what you've shared, which is great, but I like the listener to hear that. However, in my household, my husband hasn't probably done as much like self-reflection as I do because it's not something I think he enjoys as much as I do. So like I said, I don't know, were we recording? I don't think we were, but before I left to come here, my husband was serving the kiddos dinner. And so my daughter was getting upset because it was what was it? They're eating like chicken Alfredo. So she was upset that the noodles weren't like spinning correctly on her fork. And my husband is already frazzled because he's trying to cook and he knows I'm leaving. So he gets all stressed out because he's babysitting our kids right now. And so he's like, it's fine, like just eat it. And so he just kind of throws his hands up and is like, just take a bite, like it's not a big deal, kind of negating her like mindset. Meanwhile, my 2-year-old is saying, can I just play and eat? And honestly, I kind of let them like come back to the table, they sit down and eat, and then they kind of wander off. I personally don't care about that. But I'm like, you're going to have to ask Dad because Dad hates that. He has no patience for that. He's like, we sit down and we're calm as a family and you put the food in your mouth. And like, he's a very like clean your plate kind of guy. And I'm like, I just don't care. Like, it's also because I just reached a point of not caring anymore. That's the stage I am in parenthood. Of just like, you know what? You're growing, balance.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
And I have had the same situation in my house, and my husband is even well trained by me. So, it's hard for people to make these shifts because it's not like normal or natural to us. But there's so much research that actually shows the more we pressure kids to eat, the more they hate the food, the less they actually eat, the less they weigh, the pickier they are. So it totally backfires. Because you get stressed out, right? Like if you come to the table and somebody's like yelling at you to eat, your adrenaline and cortisol are spiking. And of course you're not hungry anymore, right? Like you don't want to eat anything. So yeah, it's a total backfire, unfortunately, but it takes a lot of practice and, reframing to
So just re-narrate. So I'm gonna re-narrate all of that to my husband. Got it.
How how much have we confined ourselves and our children just as a society by trying to create order? And in fact, rather than creating order, we've almost created disorder. Like it's
Right.
had an opposite effect.
Or we as parents were more stressed out, because even hearing you say that, and Jen, you say that too, it's, you know, there's an age gap between my stepson and my littles. However, I have definitely shifted how I see not only food, but how I see the power struggle of like feeding my children. And 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 so I can see how that can be really difficult because my husband hasn't made that conscious effort. And it just turns into this like this expectation that we as parents have. And then I like what you asked in the very beginning, Jen, like why is it that we want our kids to do, like why do we want them to eat this? Because if we go down the rabbit hole, we're like, well, they're just malnourished and then I'm a shitty parent. And it's so funny that it goes to that, like it's such an extreme, because I gave them mac and cheese for like 3 meals today, because that's kind of all I could really feed them.
Okay, and my husband might get frustrated with me. I'm sorry, Joel, in advance. But Joel called me and he was like, did you say Finnegan could have ice cream for breakfast? And I was like, uh-huh. And he's like, why? I'm like, how is that any different than a donut or fruity cereal that we have accepted as a society? To me, that is absolutely, it's not any, a donut is a fucking piece of cake. It's a piece of cake that we are allowing, or we're like, yep, this is breakfast, right? Because society says it's okay. I don't know. I just, sometimes we get wrapped up in what, instead of just, let's just calm down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it reminds me of my 8-year-old went through a big phase where he was up before everyone and would, sit and watch his iPad. And it was probably months where there were many times I woke up and he was sitting there watching his iPad, like with a bowl of chocolate chips that he'd helped himself to.
Oh my God. I swear to God, your
independent little 8-year-old.
He is exactly like my 8-year-old. I wish you lived closer because they probably would be best friends.
Yeah, he's unique.
Yes, my 8-year-old is always up before everybody. Okay, so that gets me on the question of snacking. So what's your 8-year-old? Are you comfortable sharing your 8-year-old name?
Yeah, Arden.
Arden. Okay. So does Arden snack? Because Finnegan is snack all day. Like he eats when he's hungry. There are some days where he barely eats. There are other days where he will literally eat me out of house and home. But when it comes to that traditional, I think sometimes we get rigid in that traditional 3-meal mindset.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times he snacked so much that then when it comes time to sitting down, eating whatever is for dinner, he's like, I'm full. But then 2 hours later, he's hungry again, but that food is now cold. I guess, what is your opinion on snacking?
Yeah, I mean, Arden's preferred time to snack is like 5 minutes before dinner's ready.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it'll be like, Mom can have a banana. And I'm usually like, well, you can have that after supper if you want, because I'm putting time and effort into cooking and I'm fine with you eating bananas, but it's kind of rude to the chef if you fill up on whatever right before dinner's offered. I snack a lot myself. Like I couldn't go 3 meals a day, honestly. Like I need to eat every 2 hours. So I think it's normal to snack. Some people aren't hungry and they don't need to, and that's totally fine. With kids, they do prefer snack foods because it tends to be the goldfish crackers or, a chocolate chip granola bar or the tasty, easy things to eat.
I'm the same.
Yeah, right. Who doesn't love those things? Goldfish are tasty. And if you don't have a problem with that, I say that's fine. For parents who are really, really frustrated that their kid's not eating dinner, I would probably suggest a break between snacking and dinner, like closing the kitchen for, at least an hour, because then they will have more appetite, obviously, when it comes to the table, right?
That's a good idea.
It's differently, but that'll give the kid more appetite if you're really focused on them eating dinner. And dinner is a big thing for us, right? Like we always think that it should be the biggest meal of the day. But for most kids, it's not, right? It's totally normal for them not to eat dinner because they've gotten enough to eat throughout the rest of the day, or they're tired, or they're excited because everyone's home or whatnot. So,
or they want to play and they want to have fun. And like, that's where I feel like it is for my kids.
Yeah.
My kids get squirrely around dinner time because it's closer to bedtime too. So they're like, I call them drunk, like they're kind of drunk. And that's why my son was like, can I play and eat? Because he wanted to run and then come back when he wanted a few bites.
Yeah.
I read somewhere though, and I've tried this with my littles. If I was feeling like a failure as a mom by like excessively allowing goldfish crackers to be like eaten, and that's the only meal of the day, is if your kiddo asks for a snack, say, oh, like a cookie. If they're like, oh, I want a cookie, or I want like this, then I ask, okay, what do you want with it? And I give choices. And when I did that, they would be like, oh, okay. So they would ask for like a slice of ham or like a slice of cheese, and they would end up eating that and then kind of be over the cookie or over the goldfish. So in my head, I was like, okay, cool. Like they didn't eat the entire box of goldfish today because I've kind of convinced them like, well, what do you want with it? And that would kind of help determine how actually hungry they were too.
True. No, I love that. And then they're getting 2 food groups, right? So technically more nutrition. And I love that we're talking about goldfish because my kids used to be obsessed with them when I'd buy like the little bags from the store. They'd be gone in like
I'm
an hour.
obsessed with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I started buying the goldfish from Costco.
Me too.
Like,
I buy them for me,
okay.
but let's be honest.
But they're over it now. Like, I don't know. I think they just got sick of the goldfish. So they're like sitting in the pantry and they go stale. So sometimes it's just that, if we would tend to be the same, right? If we get something that we love every so often, then we're going to eat as much as we can, as quickly as we can. But if it's just there kind of all the time, it's not like special. Right? So on it.
It's so funny you say that because Jamie had brought up an example the other day about how she lets her kids, if they want cookies or whatever,
Oreos are a big deal in my house. Yeah. Oreos.
So she's like, I let them have it because then it's not this taboo thing of, oh, I can't have this.
Or you have to earn it. Well, and that's honestly because going back to my stepson, with my stepson, he had to earn dessert. He had to eat this many bites to get the food that he preferred. Because going back to your quote of like, we don't know what we don't know, right? Well, at the time in those younger years of mine, and when he was younger, I only knew behavior modification and like, they're trying, to fight for control. So you have to, have a consequence kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was attacking it with that mindset. Now, fast forward to where I'm at today is I'm like, oh yeah, we should not put food on a pedestal because that's where my stepson is at. He does it to himself as a teenager now. He literally won't go eat an Oreo unless he feels like and I'm like, buddy, if you're full, stop eating, first of all. If you want a cookie, like have at it,
Jen, what wisdom do you have when it comes to, because I mean, obviously we're living in a society right now of our relationship to food is more often than not unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And we're just continuing to pass that off. Like what advice, I guess, would you have for parents and just for individuals in general?
Yeah, well, I think, Jamie has it right in terms of we don't want to bribe with desserts, console with desserts, right? We do that a lot with kids. If they're crying, here, have a cookie. So that's basically creating emotional eaters, right? So if they're sad in the future, they'll go eat a piece of cake. Or if they feel like they've worked really hard, then they earned those cookies.
Right.
So
I do
yeah,
that like currently because that's how I was raised. I'm like, all right, Jamie's going to get a cupcake.
Jamie fucking earned that shit.
I know.
Or I can't even
Yeah.
tell you how many times I overate because I had to eat everything on my plate in
Yeah.
order to eat my dessert. But I just really wanted the dessert. But then the dessert became so unappetizing because I was so full.
yeah. So you were trained to overeat essentially, right?
Yes, because you had to clear your plate, right?
Yep.
But there
Yeah.
are times even as an adult where I'm like, I'm not even hungry for dinner.
Yeah. And dessert is like love. It's offered to everybody, even if they didn't eat their dinner. And I like the idea of serving it with the meal, actually, because then there's no way that it's going to be the bribe, right? It's just there. And if it is normal to your kids, then they will go back and forth and they might not finish the dessert. So I think that's a good way to manage it too.
I agree. I very much agree. We don't do that here, but I do love that idea because I just think about times I've gone to like conferences and there's the cake, it's sitting right there and I'm waiting for my meal. I don't usually eat my cake first. I wait until I get my salad and my meal, and I might drink my coffee, maybe take a bite or two of the cake, but I haven't finished it. So, maybe it's just all about fucking trust, right?
Yeah, I think, to a degree that's true. If we're raised like that from the beginning, basically it's called intuitive eating now, essentially, right? Or eating competent. Basically, we eat, what we want when we need it, like when we're hungry, and when we're full, we stop eating. And if you want a piece of cake, you eat it. And I think that whole like intuitive eating concept is awesome, but it's not natural to us now in this society, right? Like I know I've heard you guys talk a lot about the patriarchy, so I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. Diet culture, diet industry, like multi-billion-dollar industry. Obviously doesn't work, or it still wouldn't exist, right? It's just a money-making factory to make us feel shitty about ourselves and that we're eating the wrong things or too much or what.
Or that we're poisoning our children by giving them too many goldfish and Oreos.
Or that we're not thin enough, we don't look beautiful enough. So then we develop our own complexes and then pass those off to our own. I mean, there's so many young women that I've heard develop complexes because their parent had the complex, their mom, like our people our age, where their mom was like, "Ooh, should you be eating that?"
Yeah, or even the thing mom says about herself, right? Like looking in the mirror and saying, "Oh, my butt's so big." And then the daughter kind of like has a similar shape as her mom, right? So she looks at herself and says, "Oh, well, damn it, I must have a big butt too then."
Right.
So here they internalize too.
But then
I've been trying to preach to my kids, like food gives you energy. Some food gives you energy that lasts a big, long time, right? Like the eggs you eat in the morning, or like, because we like protein. My husband's like a farmer, so we eat a lot of meat. So I'm like, that gives you long energy, and like short energy is like your Oreos or your crackers, like the stuff that's really just kind of fake food. And so, but it's hard because daycare is my parents, and my parents will say things like, you have to earn the treat, right? And you get a treat for being good. But that's actually not that healthy. And they say a lot of comments like that, so my daughter, who's picking up on it now that she's 5, she hears me saying it, but then every once in a while she'll say, "But this food's not as healthy as this food, is it?" As she'll like point to what's on her plate. And I'm like, well, remember, it's all healthy because we're eating it. We wouldn't eat it if it's unhealthy, but it gives you just different energy. And so she's just like, well, but Grandma and Papa say, that this isn't as healthy. because
Oh,
that's kind of how my mom talks about food. Yeah,
then- so then
definitely.
how do you navigate that? Jen, give us the wisdom, all of the wisdom.
Help me.
So
Help,
hard.
help. No, but how do you navigate when, you know, the schools or the daycares or the caregivers are saying one thing, or even your partner is saying one thing, and it's like you're trying to
Well, I mean, I've had family members comment about like what my kids eat, and they'll be like, "Ooh, you know, are you gonna allow that?" Or my family members, like if their children are around my children, they'll say things too, like, "Well, that's not healthy," or you know, "We can't have that." And so more mixed messages, not just caregivers, but you know, other kids.
Well, I think the
you're like,
daycares
oh God.
and schools. No, this
Sorry.
is a tough question. I don't know if I have the answer, but the daycares and schools need to work with the dietitian and have some kind of nutrition policy that is healthy, right? It's harder when you're dealing with family or with in-laws or with friends. You can be straight up if you're willing to do that and just say, we don't talk about what people eat here, or something like simple like that, or talk to them. You know what's going to come up, right? So talk to them, maybe not in front of your kids, not at a mealtime. I have not gone that route. Basically, my in-laws are similar and I just ignore it. I just ignore it. Like when they're at the table saying something, I just pretend they're not saying it. And you can have a conversation with your kids after, right? Like we've had other things come from other households that we don't believe in, and that the kid will ask whether it's like religion or food or whatever. And you're like, well, what do you think about that? Right?
Yeah.
So if people have different ideas on all sorts of things, and it can just
Yeah.
open the door to some critical thinking skills, I think.
Right. Yeah, I do the same. I do it as a dialogue of, yeah, that's what grandma thinks. Because whether it's someone they're related to or their cousin, it's going to happen to strangers, right? Like society has opinions about how we look and what we eat too.
You have to learn the
So,
rules of the game.
yeah, I need to equip them to, well, there's different ideas. This is what we think. You decide.
So another question I have for you, Jen, is like, how do you, I guess from my own experience, my kids are obsessed with candy.
Uh-huh.
Candy. That's all they want. Candy, especially my 6-year-old, but all of them. And carbs, you know, like my 15-year-old literally will eat a
Same.
giant bowl of cereal for breakfast. And this is me not regulating a goddamn thing. Okay. He's feeding himself. Giant bowl of Lucky Charms for breakfast. Lunch will consist of a huge thing of mac and cheese, like a whole box of mac and cheese. And then dinner is literally, you know, waffles or some other huge high carb thing. And it's like, unless like I don't know what to do. I don't know, am I failing as a parent if I intervene, or am I succeeding as a parent if I intervene? Because it's like you're literally eating non-complex, like simple, you're eating simple carbs all fucking day. But I mean, homeboy is like 6 feet and 120 pounds. I don't know, maybe 100 pounds. He's so thin. But I mean, it's not like he's this overweight person or that he's not growing. He's intuitively eating. He's like, what is what? But if you offer him a cookie or ice cream, if everybody's eating ice cream, he'll be like, nah, I'm good. Like he doesn't want it. Like he's not overeating. So like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the age of the kid, but at 15, I think it's okay to, you know, give them a little nutrition education, or suggest or request that he chooses 2 or 3 food groups for every meal, right? Like you can have your cereal, but can you also please like put a banana or some blueberries on that? And it's probably, I mean, not that he doesn't want to do it, he's just being lazy, right? I'm guessing, because I have a 15-year-old.
100.
Okay.
100.
Okay, so maybe there's like some baby carrots in the fridge you can eat with this mac and cheese, or like put some frozen peas in the water while it's boiling, right? So just to increase his variety, and he'd probably be fine with actually doing that. Just suggesting it.
I don't know where to intervene, if I should intervene, if I shouldn't. Like I don't want to fail as a parent, but it's very
But
difficult.
is she failing?
Right. But am I failing? I'm okay admitting that I'm failing. I just don't know, like, where is the line anymore? I think that's where I struggle. Like, where is that line? When do I allow my kids to intuitively eat?
Yeah.
And when do I intervene?
Yeah, that's the problem, because I don't think there is a line, and it changes as they get older. Like
Great.
for your younger kids, like part of the parents' roles in the division of responsibility are when they eat, which we've talked about, where they eat, what they eat. So, you're offering the foods. You're not making 5 different meals, like shorter to cooking or anything like that. But as they get older, they have to start making some of their own decisions, obviously, right? Like they're at school, at the cafeteria, or going to their friend's house. So that changes. Really, what you can do is just have all the foods available in the house that are easy for them to consume and choose, because they're lazy, right? They're not going to do it if it's not easy. So I think a part of it is just having, like that fruit bowl there, or some chopped up veggies, even if it's just the pre-bought, like peas and carrots, right? That you don't have to do anything to. Just having them like within plain sight, easy to eat. And then just like you said, sometimes he'll choose it, right? We tend to choose the easy option.
I think that's a good point, because I will a lot of times, I love Costco fruit, and it stays in the fridge for a really long time with like those airtight containers. So we always have fresh fruit. My kids do love fresh fruit. Now, I'm not a huge veggie. I'm not a huge veggie household. We could get better at that.
Did you know that fruits and vegetables have the same nutrients?
That makes
Oh,
me feel better.
I know that makes so many parents feel better, because a lot of kids won't eat vegetables, but they both have vitamin C, they both have folate, they both have vitamin A. So they're the same food group, fruits and vegetables. So not that you shouldn't have or offer vegetables, but if they're eating fruit, that's a win.
Oh, that makes me feel better, because my kids do eat a lot of fresh fruit, and there are a lot of times where they surprise me and they'll get a bowl of grapes, or like my daughter loves getting those meat and cheese trays because she's like a charcuterie queen, and she loves those like pre-made trays, and she's like, "Ooh, can I have that for a snack?" I'm like, "Why are you even asking?" Yes, only ask me for sweets, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we like carbs and sweets, especially kids, because it's the easiest source of energy. Honestly, right? Like simple carbs are absorbed the easiest, and they're the quickest source of energy. So I think that naturally, we like them.
Yeah.
Well, and I read somewhere too, I'm sure this fits as well, that like those foods, those simple carbs they taste consistent every time. Goldfish, Oreos, crackers, bread, compared to like fruit. Sometimes it's sour, sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's bitter. If it's in the fridge versus if it's sitting on the counter. So if it's cold or hot, because I know my kids get really picky if like they don't like it if the apples or oranges are cold.
Oh, they would
That really upsets them. Yeah.
Yeah, so processed food is very consistent, and that's why kids, especially extreme picky eaters, like it. And you're right, like they also might eat, say, like freeze-dried fruits or vegetables, maybe frozen, but like you said, fresh is very different. And if we were thinking of like a sensory sensitive kiddo that doesn't like certain textures, like they bite into like a fresh blueberry and it's crunchy, and then all of a sudden it's mushy, right? Like it changes with every bite.
Yeah.
And yeah, processed food, which is the same every time they have it. So try frozen or freeze-dried produce if your kid won't eat fresh. There's a reason for it.
But I mean, even those same things bother me. Like I have just figured out how to look at them and tell. So I can choose to not eat, like, I don't have to have the disgust because I can be like, ooh, that's a mushy blueberry. No, thank you. Or I'll just throw it in the microwave and warm it up and throw it in my yogurt. And then I've got blueberry yogurt, right? So figured out ways. But yes, having fresh fruit is very difficult in your house. And a lot of times kids aren't going to eat, they're not going to eat the process or the, like vegetables. They're not going to eat those things, right? So processed food, especially for our low income families, it's so much easier to have that on hand. I mean, in order for us to have fresh fruit in our house, we go to Costco once a week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it,
we do
like,
too.
if we don't go once a week, then we don't have fresh fruit because it goes bad. And it does stay a while in our fridge, but it won't stay on our counter.
Yeah. And it is expensive. So if, people in your house will eat dried, frozen, canned, that's totally fine too. It's cheaper and more shelf stable. So
yeah,
no problem.
Yeah.
So then, unless Angee has any other questions and more help that we desperately need, clearly from you, Jen, I wanted to give you a minute as well to share more about any programs that you offer or things that our listeners might benefit from. And I know we didn't touch on, but you definitely do baby-led weaning. So to help out our listeners who have little ones. But yeah, just open the floor for other programs you offer too.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. So I do have a book published called The Parent's Guide to Baby-Led Weaning for people at that stage. It's on Amazon, in some bookstores. And then for the picky eaters, I have a program for 2 to 6-year-olds. It's online for parents of 2 to 6-year-olds. And I'm just starting a new program called Food School for ages 6 and up. So Angee, that's a video you saw of me demonstrating a little bit of what we'll be doing in Food School. So I have those freebies on my website at firststepnutrition.com, both a free webinar for the older and the younger picky eaters, some videos you can check out if you're interested in learning more.
I absolutely loved, again, it was the only thing I saw on there, but the food group and kind of learning about that, because one thing that offered, Jen, that I think so often in our fast-paced world that we don't allow is the ability to be present. It was the paying attention to what I was smelling, what I was hearing, what I was seeing, what I was tasting. And so often, we as adults are go, 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 right? Our mental health is secondary because we are just having to go, go, go. And we, in a sense, we do the same thing with our kids where it's get up, get ready. We got to go. We got to get to school. Let's go. Get your shoes on. Get your shoes on. We know that's a hardship in Jamie's household. Get your shoes on. Let's go, go, go. And then we get home and then it's okay. Let's get in the shower. Let's get in the bath. Let's eat our dinner. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. It's bedtime. And we don't spend time just being present. And I think that's one of the gifts that food program allows is once we can slow down and be present, maybe then we can see the joy in the mundane. We can see the joy in the things that we're afraid of, or the joy that oh my God, Siri, you're driving me crazy. But we can just see the joy in the everyday things, such as your son eating a grape and paying attention to how it crisps in his mouth, or how it smells, or whatever that is. We don't pay attention. I love that. I'm sorry. I loved that so much.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a huge part of intuitive eating that I myself have troubles with too, right, is just taking the time at the table, like without phones, to like look at your food and taste it instead of just swallowing as quickly as you can because you need to eat and get on to the next thing. So I think that's a great point. It's a good gift to give your kids, I guess, a little bit of time, right? Enjoying the food. And like Jamie said, getting them cooking is awesome too, right? Give them those skills. If your 2-year-old wants to make a peanut butter sandwich, fantastic.
are there any other last words of wisdom, last program plugs, last just you're fucking
Things you
awesome,
wish we would have asked.
like seriously, the shit, the beautiful shit that you're spreading in the world, any other things that you want to share or that we could benefit from, our audience could benefit from, because you have a wealth of knowledge that we don't. So please enlighten us.
Thank you. Well, I think we covered, a lot, but as moms, we have too much stress and put too much pressure on ourselves. So I think if we can, wrap our minds around the fact that we don't have to get our kids to eat. It's not our job to get them to eat their broccoli at dinner. It's our job to, provide the food and then step back, and that'll work towards raising a healthier child anyways. So we can take so much of that, pressure off of ourselves, and I know family dinners aren't always enjoyable because there are fights and whining and crying, but it doesn't have to be about the food, right? It doesn't have to come from you towards your child in terms of trying to get them to eat more. And dinner will be a little more pleasant for everybody, hopefully.
Oh, Jen, thank you so much. Thank you
Welcome.
so much
It's fun
today and sharing your wisdom and just taking the pressure off. Really, I don't think you probably realize, because sometimes we don't see the level that our gifts enlighten the world, but just the gift that you bring of taking the pressure off to have to fit within this box of 3 meals a day, or having to pressure our kids, or having to feed them certain things and get into these arguments. Like it's just such a relief. And so thank you for just being you very much.
Glad to hear that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Happy.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'll make my husband listen to this.
And maybe your stepson's mother too.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, Jen, thank you. Well, we will go ahead and end it today. Jamie didn't have a mug, but I will go ahead and say that my mug says, "Don't forget to be awesome," because obviously Jen is a great example of being awesome. And don't forget that you're still an awesome parent, even if you aren't making sure that your kids are eating their Brussels sprouts or their fucking broccoli, and they're eating ice cream for breakfast and or dinner. You're still fucking awesome. So we love you and thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
If you think we're cool,
Or even if you don't,
please like or subscribe so you'll stay up to date on all things The Shrink Show.
feel free to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Shrink Show.
You can also visit our website at theshrinkshowpodcast.com to check out some of our merch, submit your episode topic requests, tell us a funny story, or even donate money or gin to the cause.
Thank you for choosing to spend a portion of your life with us. And remember, don't take yourself too seriously. Life is all a giant shrink show.
A Huda Media Production.
Side effects of listening to this podcast may include side aches or snorting from laughter, impromptu jazz hands, nodding in agreement even though you might be listening alone, an occasional "you said it, girl," and mild cases of existential dread. This podcast is strictly for entertainment and informative purposes only, and is not intended or implied to diagnose, treat, or otherwise substitute for professional mental health, medical, legal, or other advice. Thank you.